Greetings, everyone. My name is Judith Dutil. On behalf of the Online Learning Toolkit team, I would like to thank you for joining us this afternoon for this webinar on productivity for higher educators. I, along with my colleague Melissa Whaler, will be moderating today's discussion in the chat panel. We're simply thrilled to be joined by our presenter today, Bonni Stachowiak. You may know Bonni as the host of the Teaching in Higher Ed podcast, where she gets the privilege of speaking with exceptional educators on a weekly basis. Since 2014, her podcast has provided a space to explore the art and science of being more effective at facilitating learning. Teaching in Higher Ed also explores how to improve our productivity so faculty can have more peace in our lives and be even more present for our students. Bonni is the Dean of Teaching and Learning at Vanguard University of Southern California. She's also an Associate Professor of Business and Management and teaches a few times a year in an educational leadership doctoral program. She's been teaching in person, blended, and online courses throughout her career in higher education. Bonni and her husband Dave are parents to two curious kids who regularly shape their perspectives on teaching and learning. On a personal note, speaking for both Melissa and I, Bonni is a tremendous influence on our pedagogy. One of my favorite moments on Bonni's website is when she discusses how she used to teach in her room at home and that her stuffed animals and dolls were her students. That's not only something that I did myself as a child, but I see my now 6-year-old lining her stuffies up to teach them as well. Teaching is a sacred tradition and a vocation as much as it is a career, and Melissa and I are both deeply appreciate the work that Bonni has done to pull a community around this work by providing a platform for educators to share their innovations and to facilitate open and honest conversations about the best parts of this work, as well as the biggest challenges. And some of the biggest challenges we seem to share are time management and productivity. As instructional designers, Melissa and I see this as one of the biggest challenges our faculty have in common. Faculty have so many hats to wear, so many responsibilities to juggle. And throughout her presentation today, Bonni will be referencing her book, The Productive Online and Offline Professor, new this month from Stylus Publishing. Bonni has also kindly brought us a discount code so we can all make this a top title on our summer reading lists. During today's presentation, please keep your microphones muted and use the chat panel to provide questions. This is a live presentation, so Melissa and I will make note of any questions or comments that aren't addressed during the presentation for Bonni to catch up with after she concludes. We thank Bonni for making time to speak with us today. And without further ado, I'll pass the virtual microphone over to Bonni. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Well, welcome to everyone. I see that we have people from the UK. We've got people from across the states. And who knows, maybe someone's calling in from Southern California, which is where I'm calling in from. I'm cracking up at your story about your 6-year-old. That's not the funny part. The funny part to me is that I also have a 6-year-old. And yesterday, my 6-year-old and my 8-year-old and my husband all came to Vanguard. We did a little book release party. So here's the book. And my daughter read the dedication. She was very excited. They're very honored that they get the book dedicated to them. It says, "To our two children, Luke and Hannah, who make me want to be more fully present in life and not miss a bunch of all the good stuff that's right in front of me." And I loved that she could be there and she could read those words. And Luke, actually, when I was getting them out of the car yesterday at work, he said, "Mommy, I'd like to read your book someday. And could I read it?" And so he's all excited. We're going to get him his very own copy. But it did sort of crack me up because apparently she had asked my daughter, "Could I sit on your lap while you and Daddy talk?" And I said, sure. And so apparently unbeknownst to me, they were sort of really putting on a show that Dave and I didn't notice, including she kept holding the book up and pointing to it and pointing to her name on the dedication. And at one point, actually, she stood up and shook her little behind. I had no idea that any of this was happening. So apparently we put on quite the book release party, and I'm excited to be sharing with you today a few thoughts that I had around how to get started in all of this, or if you are started, how to maybe get unstuck a little bit, because that's something that's so common for people. So one of the things that I have prepared is a little bit around a way of thinking about where to keep stuff. And it actually does kind of go back maybe Judith's story is actually perfect, because when I think about my room growing up, I do write a little bit about, I was always playing teacher with my dolls and my stuffed animals and all of that. But what I've never mentioned is that I also was really, really not a very, I didn't have a very clean room growing up. And I never really learned that. And I'm seeing with my own children now just the importance of having a place for everything. And one of the things that really gets us stuck with our productivity is when we don't have places for things. So it stays in our email and we keep reading the same email over and over again, or we're just not able to get any traction on an idea that we have for our class because there's no place for keeping ideas for our classes. And we're not able to fulfill our commitments because we don't even know what commitments we've made. So that's really a little bit of what I'm going to be sharing about today. And I have called today's presentation Buckets of Productivity. And of course, hopefully you see the double entendre there with that, because we want to do meaningful work. We want to be able to fulfill our commitments. We have so many aspirations, and then we let ourselves down. We have more stress than we need to experience. We let the people we care about, including our students, down. And so here are some thoughts around 5 places and spaces that'll help you get stuff done. So all around the vein of just having places to put things so that you know, oh, that's where I go to brainstorm ideas. Oh, that's where I go to look at all my projects. That's where I go when I want to go look at some things I've saved around a particular project that I'm working on. So it's buckets of productivity. I suspect that many of you maybe have listened to the podcast, or maybe you were introduced by the online learning toolkit. But as was mentioned, I hold a number of roles in my life. I am a dean. I'm a podcaster. So I have produced since June of 2014, every single week. Rain or shine, whether it was the best episode I ever could have done or one of the ones that I go, oh, I did okay, but not the best I could have done, but just that consistent releasing of podcast episodes. And then I still do teach. I teach once a semester, and I also teach in a doctoral program as well as an adjunct. So lots of roles. Those are my professional roles. I mentioned also being a wife and being a mother and a friend and a caregiver and all the in between. I'm actually going to ask you in the chat box if you are up for this to maybe share a few of the roles that you play in your life. So on the chat box, I'd just love to hear a little bit about some of the roles that you play in your professional work and in your other parts of your lives. I see writer showing up. I see mom showing up. A dog mom. Have you got an hour? I hear you. I hear you. Instructional designers popping up. Head of the household, teacher, manager, daughter, doctoral student. Yeah, there's a lot that's going on in our lives. A lot that's going on. One of the ways that we can start thinking about our own productivity is just to get clear on what those roles are. And those roles for me evolve over time, where, as an example, when our children were real young, the toddler ages, I didn't have friendships really that didn't involve being around people that also would be okay having kids around. Because just being able to carve out time where it's just me and a friend going to a movie, that wasn't something I was able to really prioritize very highly. And that may sound bad, heck, you give up your friendships. I didn't give them up, but sometimes those things had to be replaced with more phone calls, or, can we meet at a park and maybe walk while the kids play? It depends on what their ages are, but really thinking about our roles sometimes is a good starting point for us in thinking about our productivity. I see a librarian up there too. Definitely another role. Actually, I'm just recently started to have the library under one of my areas of leadership, and I'm just enjoying getting to know more about that and working with them on the things that they're working on. So I'm glad to have you joining us today. So we've got the different roles that we play, and I mentioned the personal life. So there's the kids actually a couple years ago. So this is a big part of my life, and they're definitely priorities of mine. And these are the 5 buckets that I wanted to share with you about today. I'm going to go through each one. I'm going to talk about what tool or tools I use to help with those areas, and then give you a little bit of advice and a little bit of encouragement. Feel free in the chat box if you have questions as you go. They'll be checking those out for you and kind of calling them to my attention. So it starts with our inboxes. And you might think about, if you are anything close to my age, I am nearing 50, then we remember when the main inbox was the one that sat on our desk. It wasn't even the email inbox. It was that one that's where all the paperwork would come in and everything. And slowly over the years, the paperwork stopped coming in as much and more things became electronic. And then when we think about it, the electronic just increased exponentially. And now we've got email and voicemail, and there's social media, both direct messages as well as people that we follow. There's a bag that many of us carry around with our computers in it, and even more ways to reach or be reached. Task managers, calendars, we've got invites coming in. I mean, there's a lot that's coming at us. So that's kind of, I put it over here to the side. And one of the things that experts talk about with regard to inboxes is have as many as you need, but as few as you need. So don't start setting up extra inboxes just for yourself, but that sometimes we do have it's realistic. For example, that you'd have email and then you'd have voicemail. You probably are still in this day and age going to have both of those. And then for social media, it can be healthy to think about how we want to leverage those instead of them using us to suck up our attention, us really thinking purposefully about that. And then an example of that in my life is that LinkedIn, if someone a former student is the most classic way that this happens. A former student will say, oh, would you be willing to write me a letter of recommendation? Or someone contacts me that way. I do try to get that conversation shifted over to email, because then I have one less inbox I have to be paying attention to. So that's just an example of trying to minimize those whenever possible. Over on the right-hand side, we're going to be looking today at a task manager, how it can help us have a place to track our commitments and help us to prioritize. We're going to be looking at our calendar and what is healthy and good to have on our calendar, and what maybe might be left behind if we try to make a calendar do something that it wasn't designed to do. Another bucket, another place for things that I absolutely love is the someday maybe list. So instead of putting everything on my task list and getting very optimistic about what's possible for me, I could do this. Oh, wouldn't it be great to read this book and watch this movie and go on this little outing and go apple picking or whatever. I can take those dreams, the things that are emerging in my imagination, and have a place just for those creative ideas, but that aren't things that I've committed to that necessarily need to have my time and attention every day. And then the last thing is, what do we do with all the other stuff that's not associated with something that's actionable? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And over on the chat box, I'm just going to, it looks like some of you are already doing this, invite you to share any reflections initially that you have around the ways that you keep track of things, whether it's a challenge that you have or where you go, oh, yep, I got this calendar thing down and I've got that figured out. Just challenges that you have around any of these buckets, or any things that you think, I've got this one really wrapped up. It's been a helpful tool to me. And Judith is mentioning she can't believe how many inboxes she manages. Yeah, I feel the same way. And then Melissa, she starts with so many inboxes, and then really is able to narrow that down. So feel free in the chat box to type out any challenges that you have or any opportunities that are really working for you. Tracy's talking about if she doesn't see it every day, it doesn't exist. Yeah, I'm definitely not going into LinkedIn every day. Fortunately, some of those tools, they'll email you, but then, you're kind of sometimes compounding the problem. Let's begin with the inbox. And some of you were starting to talk about this. The biggest challenge I see across the board in higher education, but I can even extend it beyond higher education, is us never having made that transition from that old-fashioned inbox that I talked about, where we might get 3 items in there or 4 items, maybe 10 items in a day, and everything could get processed, to today where some of us, we're talking literally hundreds of things that are flying at us. And specifically with regarding email inboxes, trying to make an email inbox be our task manager. I subscribe to a practice called Inbox Zero that was first coined by someone named Merlin Mann when he was giving a talk to Google back in 2008. So can you imagine how much has changed between 2008 and now? But even back then, he saw and really named this issue of just the ways in which it really becomes like a snowball. It just keeps coming in, and we look at it and we go, oh, I can't take care of that right now, but I got to take care of that. And just this anxiety that comes with that thing keeps taking our attention. And now I've looked at it maybe 10, 15, 20 times. I have met with people pretty regularly who have 7,000 unread messages in their inbox and are still thinking they're going to get themselves out of it. So when I have the audacity to suggest that maybe we take that and we move it into an archive file. I'm not even suggesting delete it. To archive something is not to delete it. In fact, it's to store it very carefully. Our librarians can tell us that. But that just the idea of, oh, no, but I'm going to get to this stuff. And I think, well, if you are, you can still click on the archive and go back into the old ones. But let's start fresh and let's stop having our inbox try to be a task manager. It's not very good at it. It's not very good at it. So this is an actual screenshot of my inbox, and notice there are no messages in it. No messages. That doesn't mean that everything is taken care of. If it took more than 2 minutes to do, I have forwarded it on to my task manager, which we'll be looking at in a little while. But I'm not using the inbox as a task manager. And right now I did just get back from a trip, so it's not like this 100% of the time. But the sense of relief that I get later on today when I do get back to Inbox Zero, it's going to mean that all of the commitments, I've named things that need to happen and who's responsible. So I have all these different inboxes, all these things flying at me. So the big piece advice here is don't use your email as a task manager. That's not what it was designed to do. It's not very good at helping you see the things that are most relevant given your context right now, given your priorities, and to help you do that. So that's my number one advice when it comes to this particular bucket. And there's lots more in the book that talks about inboxes and Inbox Zero and how to achieve this and how to really make email work for you instead of the other way around. Task Manager, this is a tool that keeps track of our commitments and our priorities. I use one on the Mac that is Mac only, and it's called OmniFocus. And I step back here and say that OmniFocus is probably right for you if you get excited when I start talking about the possibilities with regard to task managers. That's getting them all set up. And you can see over on the left-hand side, I can do my weekly review right there. I have things that are waiting. I'm waiting for other people. I can just click on that waiting and see who I'm waiting on and do any follow-up that's needed. There's a little Dave button over there with a heart. That's my husband. His name is Dave. So anything that I'm either waiting on him for or that I need to talk about with him, I've put a little tag on it that says Dave. And that means I have to be with Dave in order to tell him this. So I can, instead of like every time I see him, there's like something we're talking to each other about, we'll have like 5 or 6 items that will be for each other that we'll talk about when we get together. So task managers, OmniFocus is a little bit too advanced for most people. They don't get that much enjoyment out of it. Or if you're not on a Mac, a really good starting one for everyone, Mac or PC, is called Todoist. The words to do and then IST. And Todoist is great. It has a good free plan that'll get you started and then some paid options that'll take you the rest of the way that are not terribly expensive. And it can really help you set up your projects in here and your tasks. And the biggest thing, because I just talked about with the email inbox, don't use your email as a task manager. Here's the biggest trick for most of these services. You can go straight from your email, forward it to a special email address that sends it straight into your task manager. So whether you use Todoist, whether you use OmniFocus, there's going to be a special email that's linked just to your account, and we'll put it into your inbox in your task manager, and then you'll be able to handle it from there. So that's a little bit of an introduction of what a task manager can do. We started our time together today talking about the different roles that we each play, you can take those roles and then create folders inside your task manager if you want to. So you can kind of compartmentalize a little bit about the different areas of your life. So when I've got actually a writing week coming up during our spring break, I'll be writing a guide for the Chronicle of Higher Education. And I know that deadline's got to be focused on, so I'll be blocked out. So I'll really that week be spending a lot of time in the writing/research part of my task manager. And the other ones, I'm not having any deadlines for that week, or if there are, I'm trying to get things done before the deadline even comes so that that week can really be focused out on the work that needs to get done there. And the biggest thing for a task manager that I want to share with you today is it can get just as overwhelming as email can. I just told you about this special email box that we can send stuff to. Well, you could see that it could also become this list of unrealistic things and a sense of shame when we come in here because there's too much here. We need to plan out time for regular reviews. So I do a daily review, which is just what are the 3 most important things I have to get done today. For those of you that were able to join us when we first kicked off today's session, I was mentioning that yesterday we did the book release party. My kids were on campus with me at school, a little nutty. They were a little wound up because they had also just come off a week in Florida, a little nutty. And then I also taught yesterday afternoon, a 3-hour class. So my top 3 things for yesterday were watch the kids. No one was harmed. Good news. Do the book release party and teach. If I just had this task list that wasn't prioritized with what are the most important things I need to do, I could start feeling guilty about the things that weren't getting done. But realistically speaking, my day was full yesterday. So my task manager, I do those regular reviews, and I have some days that are really front stage. On stage is the analogy that some people do. But I also recognize the need to have days that I carve out that are really behind the scenes days, class prep, grading, taking care of the emails, getting that inbox down to 0. So we want to plan time for regular reviews, and a really famous kind of review that a lot of people in this space talk about is the weekly review. And in the book, I prescribe about what a weekly review looks like, what mine looks like, what yours could look like, and help you develop one for yourself. And a weekly review involves getting clear. So we're emptying all of our inboxes, the physical ones, our bag that we carry around, the folders that are in it, the papers, getting that all down to 0. And then responding to students or whoever else immediately if it takes less than 2 minutes. And if it takes more than 2 minutes, getting it over into our task manager. Getting current, so looking at the project list, the actions, the calendar. I love looking back a week at my calendar and see, is there any open loops from last week that I need to attend to? What's coming up this coming week? And then the fun thing, I mentioned that someday maybe list. I can get creative and I can reflect on how my classes are going. I'm going to check back in with you and see how we're doing and ask you the question of, do any of you use a task manager? And if you do, is there one that you really recommend? Over on the chat box, any task managers you really find are working for you well, or any tips regarding task managers? Oh, Carmen's got a recurring appointment that takes up the first 30 minutes of the day titled Email Fires, and then scheduling more specific blocks. Realistically, scheduling blocks of time for email can be really important because it's going to take its time, but then we don't let it overflow where we're just constantly looking at it all day. So having the ability to do that. Anyone have some favorite task managers you want to share in the chat box, or are you just enjoying hearing? Oh, I could go back. Yes, Planner, Microsoft Planner. We use that for more team-oriented stuff. Yeah, at my institution. Yeah, I'm looking forward to coming back and seeing the rest of what you have to say. So I'll go on to our next bucket here. Using the word bucket a lot today. Someday maybe. Oh, I think I might have gone forward. Yeah, I did skip back. So we're on to the calendar. So we looked at the task manager. Now, when we look at the calendar, these are time-specific appointments with all the needed details. So for me, if I get invited to a meeting, I'm gonna definitely want to know, or if I invite someone else, Where is the meeting being held? Is it online? If so, provide the link to the online meeting. Who's there? What's the agenda? If I know the agenda, it should be in the notes section, either as an attachment or right there in the body of the text. And if I'm inviting someone else, I don't say this is a meeting with Jane because Jane's going to look at her calendar and go, I know that it's a meeting with Jane because I'm Jane. So I try to have like both names or the name and the purpose of the meeting right there in the calendar appointment. So time specific things. What happens with the calendar sometimes is that people start to make a calendar try to act like a task manager. Now, Carmen was mentioning time blocking. She was talking about, Carmen could be a he or a she, by the way. I'm guessing, but I apologize if I'm getting the gender incorrect on this. Carmen was talking about blocking time for email. That's not anything bad. In fact, it's a practice that I do all the time, is blocking out time so that realistically I can see how long it's going to take to do stuff. But when I'm blocking out time, the stuff that has to get done, those commitments, is still being tracked over in a task manager. Every commitment that I have, date specific or not, if it's just get to it as soon as I can because I have to move this priority forward, that is stored in the task manager. And then I can actually drag it from my task manager over to my calendar to say, I'm going to spend some time writing. I'm going to take the 2 hours I'm the most energized in the morning, and that's going to be my writing time. And the other thing would be, okay, this is going to be a time when I'm going to arrive early. I know I have to get there early because I never know how long it's going to take to find a place to park. So I'm going to make a few phone calls in the 15 minutes that I have before the next thing starts at an offsite meeting, for example. So using calendars for date-specific things. And then, yes, the time blocking works really well, but use still that task manager as the main central point for where things need to get done. So don't use your calendar as a task manager. The real problem with this is it also becomes a snowball effect. Oh, I didn't have time to get to that writing, but I still have this deadline coming up. So I'll just drag it forward. Well, I'll just drag it forward to the next week. And before you know it, you have 3,700 things you're trying to drag forward and no way of really looking at what is most important for you to focus on today in the time that is available. So something just to watch for around your calendar. Next up, we have the Someday Maybe list. I shared about it earlier. This is under the section of getting creative. It's interesting to me that in the higher education space, in academia, we know that in our disciplines, that creative inquiry around our research endeavors is essential to us as researchers, to us in terms of our sense of purpose and meaning and what we really feel like we contribute. But we don't have that same sense about the other things in our life. And it becomes about, well, that's where we get creative, but in everything else, I'm not going to. And I can say it's a real joy to have a place where it's not a commitment, but it's fun. It's exciting. This happens with me all the time with technology. So I'm thinking, like, I just love whenever I hear about a new tool. The most recent one, by the way, if I may share really quick, I looked at my watch. I'm doing okay on time. The most recent one for me has been Notion. I don't know if you've heard about Notion before, but it's a little bit like Slack. It's kind of like a way of, you can make a wiki out of it so you could document your processes around things, or you could have a series of steps. Maybe it's you write blog posts, and so you want to build your editorial calendar there. I mean, it's almost like having a really amazing set of Lego pieces. And about in the last 6 months, they released it to be free for anyone with an EDU email address. So that means we don't have restrictions as far as file sizes and the number of records we could have. So it's a really good deal. I have been sitting on that for a while. I've been sitting on it intentionally because I knew I didn't have the time to invest. Last week I was at a speaking engagement, and this week I'm actually headed down later this week to another conference. It's a busy season. So when I don't have time to play with the toys, those are toys for me, but they're also related to our work. They go on my Someday Maybe list. No one was telling me they needed me to go look at Notion. By the way, I did go look at it. It's really cool. And I'm starting to find all these applications for it. So the Someday Maybe list is where we keep, oh, I want to go check out this new educational technology for my class. Oh, I want to learn more about sketchnoting. Oh, I want to go to take the kids to this apple picking thing I heard about that's an hour away. Ooh, I want to read this book. I want to watch this movie. That's the someday maybe list. I'm not committing that I'm going to read the book. But when I need a fresh idea of some books that are really cool, I can go there and refresh my memory. So this is our place to get creative. Don't just have our creativity just stuck with our discipline and our research endeavors, which, by the way, to me, don't always feel that creative either. This is a really wonderful place. It's a wonderful bucket where you can keep things. In my particular instance, I keep my someday maybe list in an app or service, a web service called Trello. Trello is one of those card-based services where I've got all these different categories going across the top and then little cards, like little index cards for each of the places. And I can put on there the address of wherever it is, or if it's the ed tech stuff, the website link, wherever it's going to be. And I can keep track of those. And eventually I either trash them because I decide it's not as exciting as I thought it was before, or I can go and actually start tinkering with it when I have the time to carve out. All right, the last one, and then we'll open it up for some questions. And also I want to hear some more from you too, has to do with archives. So everything that we've looked at so far, the inboxes, those are inboxes today. Some of you might be people that have folders like I do. I try to have about no more than 9 folders where I'll drag emails over into. I've really worked at keeping those as tight as I can. I used to have like folders within folders within folders, and there's, before you know it, there's like 50 folders. That doesn't make a lot of sense, especially because of how powerful search is today. So our emails, our goal is not to use them as a task manager, and there's a lot there. Our task managers for those commitments and those projects and what needs to happen to move them forward. Our calendar for the time-specific things. And then we can also time block based on things that are already tracked in our task manager. The someday maybe list where we get creative. And finally, where do we save everything else? And that's what I'm calling archives. So these would be documents, files. They might be associated with something we're working on now, a project, or they might just be notes that I took at a conference from 4 years ago, just the notes that I either hand did on my tablet and then saved it as a PDF, or even if I hand wrote it, I can also take a digital picture. So I'm not saving so much paper and have that be available to me as well. So in terms of myself for archiving, for my own personal stuff, podcasting stuff, we use Dropbox. What I really like about Dropbox is how easy it is to share. I can just right click on a file and choose share Dropbox link, and that's how easy it is, a file or a folder. Over on the Office 365 world, so for work, we're Office 365, so there's also SharePoint in there, and there's OneDrive. The sharing options aren't quite as easy, but part of that is because my institution has locked some of that down. So it requires that someone's logged in order for me to share a file with them. So if I wanted to share a file with you, oh, here's a PDF of something I showed today, I wouldn't be able to do that through my institution. So that's why I'm glad I have the Dropbox cloud service to use. But that's really on an institution by institution basis, how much they want to lock down the file sharing. And it's time for me to give them another nudge, because it's really something that can be so helpful in terms of collaboration we do outside of it. So there's, just like I was talking about with email, my folder systems, email and file storage in general, the power of search is really pretty remarkable, such that many times people that haven't been around before search was as good as it is now, they're just comfortable when they're looking for something to go and search for it first. I have this colleague that works with me. She is the email searcher queen of all. She can just go in and find an email exactly from 3 years ago and 6 days ago, and she just got it up on her screen so fast. So much of the time now, we don't have to create quite as intricate of folder systems if we have down a good file naming approach. And I talked about that in the book, and some advice from different institutions about what character names not to use, what are some tips around naming files so that they'll show up in the order that you want to be able to look at them. And also thinking then about the power of search and how easy it makes us to be able to look for things that we want to. So this is a visual depiction of everything that I just shared. We've got all these inboxes. So we are asking ourselves, what is it that just came to us? Is there something we need to do with it? Is it actionable? If it is it a project? Do I need to add a new project to my project list? If it's going to be multiple steps that this thing is going to take, or if it's something that's not going to take multiple steps, what is the action? And so I'm going to identify what's the very next action I need to do, and that goes in my task manager. I'm all the way down at the bottom center right now, my task manager. Or I might ask, is it something I can delegate to someone else? And then it goes on my waiting list to know that I'm waiting for someone else and I can check back in with them. Or is it something that happens on a specific day at a specific time, attend this meeting, then that goes on my calendar. Does it take less than 2 minutes for me to do? And I'm working my way up the right-hand side now. I'm going to do it now, take care of it right now. So I can put that in my archive, drag it out of my inbox and focus on the other things. And then all the way over on the right-hand side, love that delete key. Do we not just love that delete key? I'm going to delete it. If it's not actionable and I'm not going to need it someday, just delete it. If it seems like a cool idea, I can forward it. By the way, Trello and other services like it have that same magic email address. So when I get a good idea about a potential guest for the Teaching in Higher Ed podcast, I forward it to my Trello board about potential guests. So I have a special email, send it just to there. I also have a special email just for my someday maybe list. And then finally, I can archive it and file it, and it's there if I need it down the road. I'm laughing so hard at this picture because someone suggested that the book, when it shows up, you don't realize how small it is. It's just so perfect and fits in your hands. I was really surprised by it. I thought it was actually going to be larger. So it was so cool when I first got it in the mail a few weeks ago. And so someone said, well, you should take a picture. And I took this picture and it made me laugh so hard because instead of looking like the book is small, it looks like I have gigantic hands. So it just made me laugh so hard. So these are a few things I wanted to share with you about buckets of productivity. And I'm looking forward to getting whatever questions that you have to share with me or comments, any tips that you want to share, reflections that you have. Yeah, Melissa's talking about the flow chart, reminded her of all the inboxes. And Melissa's also sharing about going between Google products and Microsoft products. Yeah, that's fairly normal. Yeah, Carmen said we have the same issue with SharePoint. Yeah.
Bonni, we did get a question about FERPA with the forwarding of the emails. Have you run into any questions about that?
I haven't, since for me, the learning management system, we use Canvas. It is so good about doing the class related things for me that I don't even really find myself having to forward much having to do with students into my task manager because Canvas is my own little thing. I don't know if you use Canvas or Blackboard has this, but it's more specific around grading. You can go into grading and what needs grading. So to me, that's its own little prioritization thing, and grading to me always takes more than 2 minutes, so that's why it doesn't show up needing to be emailed that quick. So no, I don't run into it that much. I don't, because I just use Canvas for what it was designed to do. They're very good about having those priorities for me, and I block out the time for grading, and then I just go and do that grading inside of the learning management system. Yeah, I use both. I teach on both Blackboard as well as on Canvas. So in the case of Blackboard, then I go up there and I just click on grades, needs grading, and then that's my block of time to empty out that inbox, if you will. Yeah. What do I do when I get behind? Oh, this is so good. This just happened. So I'm sitting here today feeling really behind when life happens and throws you off track. So I have my OmniFocus and I had to get real. This is, I'll just share with you I was returning from my speaking event and I got a little alert on my watch that said, your husband has had an emergency. Your husband has just activated his emergency alert. So my first thought was, well, it's the kids. They're just playing with the phone. He didn't realize, because we use iPhones. And so it seems like kind of easy to accidentally, alert that. And the kids wouldn't really realize what was happening. So that was my first thought. And it turned out that he actually had an emergency. They were coming home from their week in Florida and I'm in Dallas. I'm stepping on a plane And I get that. And it turns out I was able to call him and he said, we had an accident, but we're fine. Nobody is hurt. The other car, no one was hurt. No one was hurt in my car, but in their car, I should say. But as you can imagine, I spent 3 hours on a plane not being able to get in touch with them or find out even more about what's happening. And it was hard, but it also, those kinds of things, as hard as they are, it just gives us a chance to say what's really important. So I get home and yes, the to-do list is quite long right now, but it helps, I think, if we can take those opportunities in our life to just go, no one was hurt. Yes, now there's the rental car and then getting the car repaired and all. Working with my mom came up and, took the kids, lots more logistics, but yet an opportunity to really reflect on what's most important. So what I did is I had all my priorities and tasks that are sitting right up there. And realistically, it was not all going to happen. So I'm starting to think like, well, I told my doctoral students we're writing an open textbook together, and I thought I was going to work on it on the way home. Silly me. So I let them know I've got a block of time on Tuesday afternoon that I can do the next step so that we can be that much closer to our deadline. So I pushed that back a little bit. I wrote to the Chronicle of Higher Education. I asked the women how much would it affect their publishing deadlines if instead of getting the guide to them like I thought I would, if I got and did that spring break writing. And she said, not a problem. We totally understand you have things going on. So I just started ticking it off. Like, what could I push back? What has to happen now? And then I think really healthy for us in our lives is to know what is good enough. We can have all the grand plans of what excellence would look like and perfection would look like. And sometimes I just got to check that box, and I have to get a little bit more realistic with myself about how vital is it that I take it the next step forward. Can I just have it be just good enough? Because realistically, I can't have everything be as excellent as I'd want it to be. And I think that's a really healthy conversation to have with ourselves and with other people that we trust.
Bonnie, there was some other questions about using analog systems. Is there any reason why you use an analog system, or could you give us an example of a time you do prefer an analog system?
Yeah, I really do. It's funny. Katie Linder is actually the series editor for the book. So you'll see she wrote the series forward in The Productive Online Professor. The book series is called Thrive Online. I mentioned her because she is my analog sister to my digital self. So she is really enjoys, she likes this planner called Get To Workbook. And she also likes these planning pages. I mean, so she's regularly educating me about some really cool tools in the analog space. But I was so surprised to discover through listening to her podcast recently that she actually is starting to use Notion. I was like, oh my gosh, another person who's using Notion and experimenting with it. And she's now starting to discover the digital. For me, the digital is always going to be superior when other people are involved. If it's a calendar and I write it down in my calendar, and then have my colleagues write it in their calendars, and then that meeting changes or the location gets updated because we couldn't get the room we thought we could get. I mean, it just digital is going to win every time for collaborative writing, for collaborative meetings, brainstorming, that kind of thing. But I have recently started using a planner. It's the Michael Hyatt puts out the Full Focus Planner. And so for me, something about writing out my goals felt very therapeutic, and I really enjoyed that. And then he does the big 3. So it's a daily planner. It's not cheap because you're paying really for 4 planners a year. And so it's not the least expensive option, but I love the daily pages because I can take notes. I like to take notes in analog. It helps me reflect and slow down a little bit. And then also I love thinking about what are the 3 most important things for today. And that's helping me do that on a daily practice. So Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner, the big 3. He's not the only one who's written about the big 3. And of course, you could also do the big 3 in digital. But for me, there's something about, I love it because you can open the planner up and just have it out on your desk. And it's like, no matter what, it keeps sort of like pulling me back to the 3 commitments I made to myself that morning. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Well, and that's another question. So when do you plan to plan? Are you a morning planner? Do you circle back to it at the end of the day? Is there a set time where you plan to plan?
A lot of people have a set time to plan, and I have found that I really don't. Sometimes it's Friday afternoons. I'll start planning the next week. Sometimes it's Saturday. My kids do swimming and Dave usually takes them. So I might have some time Saturday morning to plan. I'm kind of all over the place. And do I get to it 100% of the time every week? No. But the weeks where I do my weekly review, I'm definitely substantially more productive than the weeks when I don't. So I feel it if I don't have the discipline. But I don't really have a schedule where I can have a specific time every week where I plan to plan, because things move around all the time. If I'm doing a speaking engagement, it's different, than if I'm home a little bit more. It really varies too much. And so I just don't have that kind of regularity. But a lot of people do, and they find it helpful. It depends how structured your schedule is or how much it changes from week to week.
Yeah, I find that myself, even when I try to plan, if I miss that first planning schedule with myself, then I get frustrated and I can tend to give up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good to hear. Anne would like to know, how do you balance time with family? Do you catch as you can or plan time to focus on spouse and kids?
I think this is so important. And I would suggest that anyone who is struggling with just this, trying to balance all these priorities, what is so good about the research that's emerging is it's not quantity, it's quality. So we can stop feeling like we have to like block schedules so much, and we just get that overwhelming feeling of I can't do it all. It's going to make such a difference if it's the quality thing than trying to worry about how much of it we do. So that's a relief to me. And then the other relief to me is to recognize the kind of personality that you have. My husband loves to just sit and play with the kids. I mean, he is a playful guy, and he can be fully present in that. And if our daughter, oh, would you play? And we'll do a tea party. I mean, he is just on board for any of that. That isn't me. I get bored in about 5 minutes, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad parent. And so that's been helpful for me just to get out of that. I like to have us moving around and going places. And I like to couple sometimes if they're going to go to a park. Why don't I walk around that park so I can get some exercise? I'm still supervising them, but I'm not going on the swings with them. They'll be fine. They'll be more resilient because they're having to get creative. When our kids get bored, it's actually healthy for them to then learn how to get themselves out of that. That's one of the things my mom really taught me growing up, was how to get out of ever feeling bored. So I hope that helps a little bit, because it certainly has brought relief to me that there's no scorecard of like, it better be at least 10 hours a week. Yeah, there's a lot of weeks where it's just not realistically going to be that. But those times when we can use our strengths and enjoy the time with our kids, I think is really priceless.
I could not agree with you more there. Judith asked this great question. I really struggle with prioritizing tasks between my various roles. So starting a task manager can help. Do you find prioritizing is easier for you now?
Yes, it's easier for me. And also because I did the goals that are in the front of the full focus planner. There's nothing magical about them, but one thing that is to me helpful is the difference between a habit goal and an achievement goal. So most of us, myself included, have the achievement goals. I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to finish the journal article. We're going to go on a vacation as a family and whatever. So those are achievement oriented goals. There's a lot of emerging research around habit goals. And my recent habit that I talked a little bit about is that I am now taking my Kindle device to bed to read 4 times a week. And I just upped my reading by more than 5-fold in a month and a half, because I changed that one habit. Instead of the iPad where I can switch around and go on all the social media, and I tease my daughter that it's like candy. A tablet is more like candy, and a Kindle where all I can do is read a book on this thing. It helps me retrain my brain to do the longer form reading. So what I'm really looking at a lot are the habit goals that couple with those achievement goals, and you really, really can see a big difference. So yeah, hopefully that helps a little bit.
Absolutely. I love that differentiation. That's so helpful. So I think that I would love to keep you here all day and ask you just a few more questions, but I also want to make sure that we are respectful of you and everybody else's time. So I don't see any other questions kind of popping up here, and we've gone for 50 minutes. So if there's any last minute questions bubbling up.
I just wanted to say thanks to Mary. She was talking about her mother used to tell me only boring people are bored. I love that, Mary. Thank you for telling us that story.
Absolutely. Judith, I think you have some information you'd like to share before we sign off.
Yes, here I'm going to pull up some more information. All righty. I just wanted to thank you, Bonni, for your generosity in sharing all of the information that you shared with us today. It was tremendously valuable. If the productive online and offline professor is not on your reading list yet, add it as soon as you are finished setting up your new task manager, which I know is something I'm about to go do as soon as we wrap up here. So I stopped using Outlook as my to-do list. Melissa is sharing the discount code for Bonnie's book in chat, and we'll also make sure we follow up with this information as well as links for the resources that Bonnie shared and the ones that you all shared with each other in chat, because a lot of interesting and valuable information was shared there as well. And those are definitely some tools that I want to look into. So we'll get those links out to you. If you'd like to learn more about best practices for online educators, the Online Learning Toolkit has an affordable subscription for online faculty development courses. You receive unlimited access for $50 to all of our content and the Online Learning Toolkit community, which is being launched very soon. We also like to remind everybody to connect with us on social media, which we are at OL Toolkit on Twitter and the Online Learning Toolkit on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I'm trying to get our Online Learning Toolkit TikTok going, but that's a little more challenging for us. Please follow us and help us connect with new faculty. Bonni, thank you so much for your time and all of this wonderful information.
Oh, thanks for having me. I was so honored that you would include me.
Well, we can't wait to become more productive. And I made this note about habit goals versus achievement goals. That is such a huge takeaway because sometimes I treat what should be habits as achievement goals. So very valuable information. Thank you. Everyone, Melissa and I will stick around a little bit longer if you have any more questions, but have a nice afternoon and thank you once again for your time and attention.